The first time I realized my life was being rewritten by someone else, I was standing in the back alley behind a diner, clutching a rejection letter so tightly the paper tore at the edges. The manager had been friendly during the interview, even smiled when I told her I could start immediately. But when I called to follow up, her voice was cold, rehearsed. "We're going in a different direction," she said. "Good luck." I knew that tone. I'd heard it too many times in the last 3 years. I didn't know then that my parents were behind it all. I just thought I was unlucky, or maybe cursed. I'd left home at 19, suitcase in hand, heart full of hope and fear. My parents said I was ungrateful, that I'd never make it on my own. I wanted to prove them wrong. I wanted to build a life that was mine, even if it meant starting from nothing. But nothing turned out to be a lot less than I'd imagined. I slept on friends' couches in my car, sometimes in the park when the weather was warm enough. I took whatever work I could find, dishwashing, cleaning, stocking shelves. Every time I thought I'd caught a break, it slipped through my fingers. Job offers vanished. Interviews ended with polite smiles and empty promises. I started to wonder if I was the problem. 8 months into being homeless, I stopped counting the days. I learned which gas stations let you wash up in the bathroom, which churches handed out sandwiches on Thursdays, which alleys were safest to sleep in. I kept my phone charged at the library, checked my email every morning, sent out resumes like prayers. I never heard back. Then one night I got a text from my dad. Just 5 words: "Come home and apologize and maybe I'll stop." I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. I hadn't spoken to my parents in over a year. I didn't know what he meant. Stop what? I typed out a dozen replies, deleted them all, and finally turned off my phone. The next morning, I went to a job interview at a hardware store on the edge of town. The manager, a woman named Linda, seemed kind. She asked about my experience, nodded as I explained the gaps in my resume. "We all go through rough patches," she said. "I'll call you tomorrow." I walked out feeling lighter than I had in months. I spent the night in my car, dreaming of a paycheck, a hot shower, maybe even a room of my own. But the call never came. Instead, I got another text from my dad. "You're making this harder than it has to be." That's when I started to suspect something was wrong. I went back to the hardware store, hoping to catch Linda before her shift ended. She saw me coming and her face fell. "I'm sorry," she said, glancing over her shoulder. "We can't hire you. Your background check. There's a record." I felt the world tilt beneath me. "That's not possible," I said. "I've never been arrested. I've never even gotten a speeding ticket." She looked uncomfortable, twisting her hands together. "I can't say more. But someone called. Said you'd lied on your application. That you had a criminal record?" "I'm sorry." I left the store in a daze, my mind racing. Who would do this? Why? I thought about my dad's texts. The way he always seemed to know when I was close to getting back on my feet. I remembered the arguments before I left home, the threats, the promises that I'd regret leaving. I started calling the places I'd applied to in the last year. Most didn't answer. A few hung up as soon as I gave my name. One manager, a tired-sounding man at a grocery store, finally told me the truth. "Your father called," he said. "Said you'd been in trouble with the law. We can't take that risk." I sat on the curb outside the store, my head in my hands. My own parents were sabotaging me. Every job, every chance, every step forward, they'd been there, pulling the rug out from under me. I felt anger, then grief, then a numbness so deep I thought I'd never feel anything again. For weeks, I drifted through town like a ghost. I stopped applying for jobs. I stopped answering my dad's texts. I stopped hoping things would get better. I was invisible, unwanted, a rumor in my own life. Then, one afternoon, as I sat in the library trying to stay warm, a woman approached me. She was older, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. She sat down across from me and slid an envelope across the table. "Your grandmother hired me 10 years ago," she said quietly. "She knew things might get bad. She asked me to find you when you needed help." I stared at her, unsure if I was dreaming. My grandmother had died when I was 16. We'd been close, but I never knew she'd left anything for me. The woman pushed the envelope closer. She left you something. She said you'd know when it was time. My hands shook as I took the envelope. It was heavy, sealed with wax, my name written in my grandmother's elegant script. I looked up, but the woman was already standing. Her coat buttoned, her eyes shining with something like pride. "Good luck," she said, and then she was gone. I sat there, the envelope in my lap, my heart pounding. For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope. I didn't open the envelope right away. I just held it, feeling the weight of it in my hands, the wax seal smooth beneath my thumb. For a long time, I sat in the library, watching the afternoon sun crawl across the carpet, listening to the quiet shuffle of pages and the distant hum of the heater. I tried to imagine what my grandmother could have left for me, what she could have known about the future that I didn't. I wondered if she'd ever guessed how far I'd fall, or how hard it would be to climb back up. When I finally broke the seal, my hands were trembling. Inside was a letter written in her careful, looping handwriting, and a small brass key taped to the bottom of the page. The letter began simply, "If you're reading this, it means you need help. I always knew you might." She wrote about the day I was born, how she'd held me in the hospital and promised to protect me, no matter what. She wrote about my parents, about the darkness she'd seen in them, the way they'd always tried to control everything and everyone around them. "You are not like them," she wrote. "You have a good heart. You deserve a chance." The letter went on to explain that she'd opened a safety deposit box in my name years ago and that the key would open it. She'd left instructions with her lawyer, and if I ever needed it, really, needed it, I could go to the bank and claim what was inside. "Don't let pride keep you from accepting help," she wrote. "You are not alone, no matter how much they try to make you feel that way." I read the letter 3 times, tears blurring the words. For the first time in months, I felt seen. I felt loved. I felt like maybe, just maybe, I could find my way out of the mess my parents had made of my life. The next morning, I walked to the bank, the key clutched in my fist. I hadn't showered in days, my clothes were wrinkled, and I was sure the teller would turn me away. But when I handed her the key and my ID, she smiled and nodded as if she'd been expecting me. She led me to a small room in the back, where she unlocked a metal box and slid it across the table. "Take your time," she said, and then she left me alone. Inside the box was a stack of cash, more money than I'd ever seen in one place, and a folder filled with documents. There was a birth certificate, a passport, and a letter from my grandmother's lawyer, explaining that she'd set up a trust fund in my name. The money wasn't enough to make me rich, but it was enough to get me off the street, to buy a few months of rent, to start over. There was also a small velvet pouch. Inside was a gold locket engraved with my initials. I opened it and found a tiny photograph of my grandmother, smiling, and a slip of paper folded into a square. On it, she'd written, "You are stronger than you know. Don't let them break you." I sat in that little room, surrounded by the pieces of my new life, and cried. Not because I was sad, but because I finally felt hope. My grandmother had believed in me even when no one else did. She'd planned for this moment, trusted that I would find my way back to myself. I left the bank with the cash and the documents tucked safely in my backpack. I found a cheap motel on the edge of town and paid for a week in advance. The first night, I slept in a real bed for the first time in months. I took a hot shower, washed my clothes in the sink, and watched TV until I fell asleep. It felt like luxury. The next day, I started looking for work again. This time, I used my new documents, my new address, my new phone number. I didn't tell anyone where I was staying. I didn't answer my parents' texts. I didn't let fear guide me. Within a week, I landed a job at a small bookstore downtown. The owner, a kind woman named Mrs. Patel, didn't ask about my past. She just handed me an apron and showed me how to work the register. For the first time in years, I felt useful. I felt like I belonged. But my parents didn't give up easily. My dad kept texting, calling, leaving voicemails that swung between threats and pleas. "Come home and apologize," he'd say. "We can fix this. You're still our child." But I knew better now. I knew what love was supposed to feel like, and it wasn't control. It wasn't sabotage. It wasn't fear. One afternoon, as I was shelving books, a woman came into the store. She was the same woman who'd given me my grandmother's envelope. She smiled when she saw me, her eyes warm and proud. "I just wanted to see how you were doing," she said. "Your grandmother would be so happy to know you're safe." I thanked her, unsure what else to say. She reached into her bag and handed me a small notebook. "She asked me to give you this too. She said you'd know what to do with it." After my shift, I sat in the park and opened the notebook. Inside were pages and pages of my grandmother's handwriting, recipes, stories, advice, and at the very end, a list of names and phone numbers. "These are people who helped me when I needed it," she'd written. "If you ever need help, call them. You're never alone." I closed the notebook, feeling the weight of her love settle around me like a blanket. I wasn't alone. I never had been. The next few weeks felt like waking up after a long, cold sleep. Every morning, I'd open the bookstore, breathe in the scent of paper and coffee, and remind myself that I was safe. I started saving every dollar I could, determined to never let anyone have that kind of power over me again. Sometimes, I'd touch the locket at my neck or flip through my grandmother's notebook, letting her words steady me when the world felt uncertain. But the past has a way of finding you, even when you think you've outrun it. One evening, as I was closing up, I saw my father's car parked across the street. He didn't get out, just sat there, engine idling, headlights cutting through the dusk. My phone buzzed with a new message. "Come home. We can talk." I didn't reply. I watched him drive away, a strange mix of anger and pity twisting in my chest. A few days later, Mrs. Patel handed me a letter. "A woman dropped this off for you," she said, curiosity flickering in her eyes. The envelope was plain, my name written in careful script. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "You're stronger than you know. I'm proud of you. Grandma." I smiled, tears stinging my eyes. Even now, she found ways to reach me. I started calling the numbers in my grandmother's notebook, just to hear a friendly voice, to remind myself that kindness still existed. One woman, Ruth, invited me for tea. She listened to my story without judgment, then pressed a 20 into my hand for groceries. Another, Mr. Harris, offered to help me fix up my resume. Each conversation was a thread, weaving me back into the fabric of a world I thought I'd lost. One Saturday, as I was shelving books, a reporter came into the store. She introduced herself, said she was writing a story about resilience and second chances. "Someone told me about you," she said, "about what you've been through." I hesitated, but something in her eyes made me trust her. I told her my story, not the version my parents had spread, but the truth. She listened, took notes, and promised to let me read the article before it went to print. A week later, the story ran in the local paper. The headline read, "From Homelessness to Hope, One Woman's Journey." My phone buzzed with messages from people I hadn't heard from in years, old teachers, neighbors, even a few distant relatives. Most were supportive, but a few were angry. My parents especially. My dad left a voicemail, his voice tight with rage. "You made us look like monsters. You'll regret this." But I didn't regret it. For the first time, my story was mine. People in town started treating me differently. Customers came into the bookstore just to say hello, to tell me they were rooting for me. Mrs. Patel gave me more hours, and I started thinking about going back to school, maybe studying social work so I could help others like me. Then one rainy afternoon, the woman who'd first found me in the library returned. She handed me a small battered box. "Your grandmother wanted you to have this when you were ready," she said. Inside was a deed to a tiny cottage on the edge of town, a place I'd visited as a child, with wildflowers in the yard and a creek out back. There was a note. "A home of your own for when you're ready to start again." I stood in the rain, the box pressed to my chest, and laughed through my tears. I'd spent so long searching for a place to belong, and now, against all odds, I'd found it. I moved into the cottage that weekend. It needed work. Peeling paint, leaky roof, weeds everywhere. But it was mine. I planted flowers in the yard, fixed the windows, and invited Ruth and Mr. Harris over for tea. I hung my grandmother's locket by the door, a reminder that love can outlast even the deepest wounds. My parents never apologized. They never stopped trying to control the story. But it didn't matter anymore. I had my own story now, and it was stronger than their lies. Sometimes when the wind rattles the windows or the creek sings at night, I think about the girl I was, the one who thought she was alone, unwanted, lost. I wish I could tell her, hold on. There's more for you than you can imagine. There's hope and kindness and a home waiting at the end of the road. And sometimes when I close my eyes, I hear my grandmother's voice, steady and sure, you are stronger than you know.